My name is Kimberly Thorne, and for most of my life, I've been a skeptic. Doubting everything was my default, probably my biggest flaw. I always needed proof. Even at church, I'd sit in the back row, quietly questioning every word of the sermon. My family used to joke that I must be a descendant of Thomas, the doubting apostle. But now I understand why I was made that way. My questioning nature was preparing me for something extraordinary. I never thought I'd be telling this story. It happened on a cold November night after an evening spent with my grandchildren. They always brought light into my life, even during my darkest times. My daughter Jennifer lives about 40 minutes away, out in the countryside where streetlights are rare. That night, as I drove home, I felt tired but content. I thought about little Tommy showing me his science project and Sarah playing her new piano piece. It was 9:47 p.m., according to the dashboard clock, when I first noticed something odd. My vision flickered. I remember thinking, I really need to get my eyes checked. Procrastination was another of my flaws, always pushing things off, thinking I knew best. The irony of that isn't lost on me now. I wasn't speeding. I've replayed those moments endlessly in my mind. The road was dark, but it was familiar. Maybe too familiar. Complacency sneaks in like that. The last thing I clearly remember was spotting a deer on the side of the road. It wasn't on the road just nearby, so I thought, at least it's not in my way. Then everything changed. They told me later I was clinically dead for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Apparently there was a second deer I hadn't noticed. It darted onto the road, and when I swerved to avoid it, my car left the pavement and hit a tree. That's what they say happened. But what I experienced was something entirely different. People ask me all the time what dying feels like. They expect a Hollywood scene, a tunnel of light, their life flashing before their eyes. For me, it was nothing like that. It was more like flipping a channel on a TV. One moment I was in my car, and the next I was elsewhere. The first thing I noticed was the absence of time. It wasn't as if time had stopped. It was as though it had never existed. In that place, measuring moments felt as absurd as trying to measure love with a ruler. I felt drawn forward, not physically, but like I was being called. It was like hearing your name spoken by someone you deeply love and instinctively moving toward the sound. The space around me, though space isn't quite the right word, was filled with a living light. This wasn't the harsh glare of a hospital or the warm glow of sunrise. It was something entirely different. The light seemed alive, aware, full of purpose. And I wasn't afraid. That was the most surprising part. I, Kimberly Thorne, the eternal skeptic who needed 3 opinions just to pick a paint color, felt completely at peace. Not a numbed calm, but a profound certainty. For the first time in my life, I knew, without a shadow of doubt, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. That's when I sensed his presence. People often ask me what Jesus looked like. They want specifics: his height, his hair, his eyes. But the truth is, I only saw him for what felt like a single moment. And yet, that moment contained more reality than all my years on earth combined. He didn't look like the soft, gentle figure we see in paintings. What I saw was power, pure, uncontainable, awe-inspiring power. It was like standing at the base of a thunderous waterfall, feeling its force reverberate through the ground beneath your feet. In that moment, every question I'd ever asked, every doubt I'd ever harbored, flashed through my mind. It was as if my lifetime of skepticism was being acknowledged, honored even. And then I knew, deep in my soul, that everything I'd been searching for had led to this. Imagine standing on solid ground and feeling the earth beneath your feet. Now multiply that sensation by infinity. That's the closest I can come to describing the presence I encountered. His face wasn't conventionally beautiful. It was something far greater, truth itself, etched into existence. You know how people say they can't look directly at the sun? This was different. I couldn't look away. That single moment of seeing his face held more reality than all the years I'd lived on Earth combined. What struck me most wasn't his appearance. It was the transformation within my soul when I saw him. Every doubt, every question, every skeptical thought I'd ever entertained didn't vanish. They were fulfilled. It was as if my entire life of questioning had been leading to this moment. Each doubt had shaped my soul, carving out space that could now be filled with profound understanding. He spoke to me, not with words, but with pure meaning that transcended language. In that silent communication, he revealed that my questioning nature wasn't a flaw, but a gift. Every doubt I'd ever had was like a chisel, sculpting me to hold even a fraction of the revelation I was now experiencing. Kimberly, he communicated, and in that name was everything I had been, everything I was, and everything I could become. He showed me that my questions had been prayers in disguise. In that instant, I understood something profound about faith. It's not about never doubting. It's about allowing your doubts to lead you to a deeper truth. The power I felt wasn't destructive. It was creative. It was the force that holds atoms together, keeps planets in orbit, makes hearts beat and flowers bloom. It was life itself, concentrated into a presence so overwhelming that a single second changed everything about who I am. People often ask if I saw angels, deceased relatives, or the gates of heaven, but in the presence of such power, none of that mattered. It would be like asking someone standing before a supernova if they noticed any streetlights nearby. As I stood in this presence, I felt myself being gently drawn back. But before I returned, he showed me one last truth. Death isn't the terrifying end we imagine. It's a doorway, a transition from one kind of life to another. I protested, not wanting to leave, not ready to part from the overwhelming love and peace. That's when he gave me one final revelation. He is just as present in our everyday world as he was in that extraordinary moment. The difference lies in our ability to perceive him. The next thing I knew, I was staring up at the worried face of a paramedic. The clock in the ambulance read 9:52 p.m. Just 5 minutes had passed in earthly time, yet to me, it had been both an instant and an eternity. The days and weeks after were challenging. I had broken ribs, a concussion, and other injuries to recover from. But my physical recovery wasn't what occupied my mind. I was consumed with trying to process what had happened, to find words for an experience that defied language. My family noticed the change in me right away, not just in obvious ways, like how I stopped sitting in the back row at church, but in subtler ways too. My daughter Jennifer said, "Mom, you're different now." She was right. I was different, and I'll never see the world the same way again. I seemed more at peace, yet somehow more alive. My grandchildren noticed it too. They said I listened differently, not just with my ears, but with my entire being. The biggest change, though, was how I viewed my own doubts and questions. Where I once saw them as barriers to faith, I now understood they had been preparing me to encounter truth in its purest form. My skepticism wasn't a flaw, it was preparation. Even now, years later, I still question things. But the nature of my questions has changed. I no longer question to disprove or dismiss. I question to understand more deeply. That encounter with divine power didn't erase my doubts. It transformed them into tools for growth and understanding. Some people feel let down when I tell them I only saw Jesus for what felt like a fleeting moment. They want vivid descriptions of heavenly realms or detailed accounts of the afterlife. But I've come to realize that sometimes a single second of pure truth is more powerful than a lifetime of comfortable illusions. I still go to the same church, see the same paintings of Jesus, and sing the same hymns. But now I understand they're all just reflections, like photographs of the ocean. They're beautiful and meaningful, but they can never capture the vastness and majesty of standing before the real waves. My skeptical nature, which I once considered my greatest weakness, turned out to be my greatest strength. It taught me how to recognize truth when I encountered it, not because it answered all my questions, but because it revealed why I needed to ask them in the first place. As I share this story, I know there will be those who doubt it, just as I would have once. To them, I say, keep questioning, keep seeking, keep doubting, but do so with an open heart and a humble spirit. Sometimes, in ways we can't predict, our deepest doubts are preparing us for our most profound encounters with truth. I wasn't chosen for this experience because I was special or virtuous. If anything, I believe it happened because of my doubts, to show that even the most skeptical heart can be transformed by an encounter with divine power. It only took 1 second. 1 second to see beyond the surface of reality and into its depths. 1 second of experiencing a power so pure and a truth so absolute that it turned every doubt I'd ever had into a stepping stone toward understanding. People often say, seeing is believing, but I've learned that true belief doesn't come from what we see with our eyes. It comes from what we experience with our souls. And sometimes, a single second of that kind of experience is worth more than a lifetime of speculation. I still drive that same road to visit my grandchildren. When I pass the spot where the accident happened, I sometimes feel a faint echo of the peace that surrounded me in his presence. It's a quiet reminder that the divine is never far, even in the ordinary moments of life. It reminds me that the boundary between the natural and the supernatural, between the ordinary and the extraordinary, is much thinner than we imagine. My name is Kimberly Morris, and for most of my life I doubted everything, until 1 second of a divine encounter revealed that my doubts weren't doubts at all. They were the questions that love asks of truth, striving to know it more fully. Now, when people ask me what Jesus looks like, I tell them honestly, he doesn't look like anything we expect, because he is far more than our expectations can contain. He is power beyond words, truth beyond understanding, and love beyond measure. And sometimes, just 1 second in his presence is enough to transform a lifetime of questions into an eternity of understanding. That's my story. It's not the longest or most detailed near-death experience you'll ever hear. It's not filled with vivid descriptions of angels or streets of gold, but it's true. And sometimes, truth is more powerful than any vision we could imagine. I still have questions. I still seek understanding. But now I've come to see that questions aren't the enemy of faith. They're its foundation. They're the seeds from which faith grows. 1 second of encountering pure truth can blossom into a lifetime of deeper understanding. To those who doubt my story, I say this: your doubts are valid. They matter. In fact, they might even be sacred. Sometimes the questions we ask are just as important as the answers we receive. And often, the longest journey of faith begins with a single moment of truth. Thank you for letting me share this with you. May your own questions lead you not away from truth, but deeper into it. Because in the end, it's not about how long we see him. It's about how profoundly that moment transforms us. And 1 second of divine power, seen clearly, has the potential to change everything.